everybody and welcome to Flock Talk. Today we're going to be doing a quick little train tutorial on how to teach your bird to target. Good boy! Now if any of you have been following this channel for any length of time, you may have never seen this little guy before. This is Newt and he is a 1-year-old maroon-bellied conure. Now he's brand new here to our flock. He's only been here for a couple weeks, about half a month or so at this point, and I've learned to love him rather quickly, so hopefully you guys will learn to love him just as much as I do. So target training is something I've tried to do a training tutorial on before, but I haven't really been able to because all my birds already knew how to do it, and I tried to use different objects, I tried anything I could think of to have to reteach it to them, and they just weren't having it. They were too smart and they would jump right through, which made an actual process of training it rather difficult. So what I've done here is I've got little Newt, who's not really been handled. The first year of his life was spent in a cage doing nothing else but sitting in there with 2 perches and no toys. So obviously he'd not been target trained, and I was able to teach him, although he was a rather quick learner, and give you guys some form of video on how to teach a bird's target training, because I know I go off on it quite a bit. So what is target training? All target training really is orienting any part of your bird's body towards an object. In this case, it's going to be your bird's beak towards the end of a stick. You can use anything you want for this. I'm using a bamboo skewer, you could use a chopstick, anything you got on hand that's long and stick-shaped. So this trick is a really simple one that most birds will pick up on really quickly, especially if they're semi-tame to begin with. Now, target training is the main basis for almost anything else you're going to want to teach your birds. And you may have heard me say this over and over and over again in many videos before, because target training is really helpful when it comes to teaching things as basic as step up to things far more complicated like recall training and flight training, or even teaching your bird to wave. All those sorts of tricks can all relay around your bird knowing how to target. Target training is also a really good way to introduce your bird to training by giving them a really simple concept to understand that they can do something and earn a reward for it. So teaching your bird target training is probably the first thing I would recommend teaching any bird that you want to start introducing to training but don't quite know where to start and you're not quite sure how your bird's going to take to it. So target training is a really useful tool that is used universally among every single animal species when it comes to the training world. So without further ado here, we're going to get started. So jumping right into it here, the first thing you're going to notice is that I am target training from inside the cage. Now this is very important right off the bat because Newt here is obviously not a particularly tamed conure, and that means that he could start running about, he could climb up the cage to where Mia is, he could get into all sorts of trouble if I were to do this target training outside of the cage. The cage is also where Newt is most comfortable, and we want the bird to be in a very comfortable state where they can leave at any point in time. By target training inside the cage here, if Newt suddenly decides that he doesn't like something, he can walk away. He doesn't have to rely on me or anything else to leave the situation. So all I'm doing here is just using a target stick, which is just a little bamboo skewer here, and I'm going to put it right near Newt because he's not afraid of the stick. I've left the stick around the room for a little bit so he's comfortable with it, and I'm just going to put it near him until he lightly touches it with his beak or decides to play with it a little bit. Now Newt went right ahead and grabbed this stick right off the bat. Your bird may not. They may actually be quite scared of the stick, so what you can do for this is put the stick quite a bit further away and reward them just for looking at it or taking a step towards it instead of having to go right off the bat to touching it. Newt, however, jumped right there, so we were kind of able to skip quite a few steps in this process. So with Newt here, as you can see, I'm just going to put the stick near his face, and then I'm going to use a long sprig of millet to feed him. Just because I don't know how Newt is fully going to respond to food, I know he's had aggressive issues in the past, so I don't want to go ahead and use my fingers really close to the cage if it's going to initiate an aggressive response from him. So I'm just going to use a long sprig of millet to reward him and see how we go from there, and since I'm not getting any aggressive body language, I can determine that that's a good way to be feeding him. So once I see that he's reliably touching the stick over and over, he's showing more immediate interest in it when I'm putting it near him, I'm going to slowly start making this a little bit more of a complicated process for him by moving it a little bit further away. So right off the bat, I'm moving it just a little bit in front of him, and then I might do things like put it behind him so he has to turn his head around to grab it. This is going to slowly start shaping the process for where I'm going to be able to use the stick at any point in the cage and have him traverse from one side to the other, which is the end goal here. Because the whole point of targeting is being able to move him by his choice, so without having to use our hands or anything, just in case we initiate aggressive responses, or if he ends up being terrified of hands, or just really doesn't want to come down. Target training is going to be a way that I can get him to move from one side of the cage, or one side of the room, or come down from somewhere high, and still willingly cooperate with it still being a completely positive experience instead of having to chase him around the cage or grab him to get him out of a dangerous situation. So I'm just gonna keep slowly moving this a little bit further away and start having him kind of have to stretch to reach where he needs to be. So as we can see here, Newt is very eagerly interacting with the stick. He's picked up on it really, really quickly. His body language is still completely calm. We're not seeing any sort of scared behaviors or any sort of responses along those lines. He's very eager to interact with the stick. So I'm going to start to move things a little bit further away. We're going to see if he's willing to climb up the wall a little bit or stretch out to grab the stick. And as you can see, he thinks about it a little bit. He takes a little bit of time to figure out exactly how he's going to get there, but he jumps right onto it and is very eager to start climbing up the wall and get some treats and touch that target stick, no problems at all. Now your bird may be very hesitant to do this. A lot of birds will be, and they'll take a couple steps to actually get them climbing up that wall and moving. But after those first couple sessions, I was able to get Newt moving pretty far away from that one perch he was on very eagerly. He really wants to touch that stick, he really wants to earn that millet. So I'm just going to keep doing this where I move it further and further away, while still making sure it's in a really easily reachable location for him, just so that way we're not stretching his boundaries too much. I don't want him going all the way to a back corner or someplace that he may not feel as comfortable quite yet. I want to keep him in a zone that I know that he's quite happy and content to be in, and just carefully see how far he's willing to go and get him moving in all sorts of directions. Eventually we're going to get a little more complicated and get him going up and down in all sorts of fun directions, just to make sure that the concept is completely solidified. Just because a bird is willing to touch the stick, within a general radius of where they are, doesn't mean they're going to be willing to touch it in all sorts of situations. So from here, I'm going to want to make sure that I do this in all sorts of different scenarios. So since Newt was very eagerly following the stick around inside the cage, I was able to get him to go all over the walls without a problem, without any second thought. I'm now going to take this concept and apply it to outside the cage. Initially, I used the target stick to get Newt outside of his cage, and I'm just going to carefully use it, again, very, very close to his body, because the main point here is to make sure that he still understands to follow the stick in a different environment. This is a very common problem when it comes to training other tricks, is that you'll have your bird on a very specific designated training perch. So when you go to ask them to do that trick, say on the back of your chair or on your hand, a lot of the times they won't do it because it's a different environment that they haven't been trained on and they don't quite make the connection. Some birds will jump right on no problem, but a lot of them will struggle to figure out what you want them to do when they're in a different setting. So by me making sure that I'm target training him outside the cage as well as inside, it's gonna help him solidify that concept and understand to do it in any sort of situation. With this training, I'm gonna wanna make sure that I do it all throughout his life. I'm not just gonna wanna do it once right now and say that's the last training session we need to have and call it quits. I'm gonna continue this training randomly throughout the day. If he's sitting on my shoulder and I want him to come down, maybe I feel like making him walk across my desk while I'm bored and typing something. Anything, as long as I am getting him used to this concept in all sorts of different environments and situations. And each time I start off in a new environment, I'm going to start off nice and easy and slow like I have here, where all I'm going to be doing is keeping it close to him, maybe just getting him to turn around, not really getting him to walk too far, just to make sure that he's still responsive to the target stick. Because that's something we always have to consider with our birds, is that if they aren't going to be responsive and cooperative, they can get into a lot of trouble. In this case, the cage right above his is Mia's, and if he climbs up that cage and either one of them decides they don't want to be there, they can seriously end up hurting one another. So I need to make sure that he is going to respond the second he starts walking up that cage and I decide I need him off. So by me repeatedly doing this behavior in all sorts of different situations and making sure that he will follow it under any conditions, it's going to make sure that situations like that are a lot easier to handle in the future. So once Newt here is at a lot more of a comfortable state, and as you can see he's very happily munching away, no signs of stress, no signs of fear, no signs of running away and doing his own thing, he's very focused on what we're doing, that's when we know that we've obviously got the concept really thoroughly drilled into his head here. He knows that right now is training time, right now means that he can earn treats, and that is all he wants. He wants to earn treats and have a great time. He doesn't want to run off and cause havoc and get stuck. So what I'm going to start doing here is seeing if he'll go a little bit further, and we're going to start stretching him along the walls of the cage and getting him exploring a lot more of his environment. Once we get him there, we will start to see just how strongly he's attached to this behavior, to the point where he's not just having to stay on one perch or one little corner of a cage. I'll be able to get him to stretch across either end of the cage because he wants it that much and because he knows what he's doing at that point. So I'm just going to calmly ask Newt to walk along one of the corners of the cage. I'm going to make it nice and easy and do it right in front of him, right close, so he can immediately go right back to the perch, which we can see that he does. That door of the cage, at this present moment in time, is Newt's comfort place. He's been training right there, he's been sitting in that one spot, reliably earning treats, so he's probably going to want to run straight back to that perch, and that is 100% okay, and we need to allow him to do that behavior. Because Newt is clipped, I want to make sure that he has very easy access to leave any situation that he's uncomfortable with. At that point in time, Newt went on the wall and it was a little close to my desk. Newt doesn't like my desk too much because it's super slippery and he can fall off of it. So he tends to walk towards it, immediately change his mind, say nope, and go right back to a place that he's comfortable with. And that's okay. I want to let Newt go back easily without any sort of human reliance to get there, straight back to a little place that he can be happy and comfortable, and not restrict that movement. If I restrict his ability to go back to a comfortable place, he's going to get terrified and afraid, and he's going to start to associate me and targeting and all of these things with being stuck and not able to leave, being forced to jump and flap and hurt himself. He's not going to be having the best time, and he's going to feel very, very trapped. And I don't want that. I want Newt to know that if I'm target training him, he has every right to walk away if he at any point feels like he's not having a great time. And for the most part, he's going to be having a great time. But when he gets uncomfortable with my desk or uncomfortable with a bird flying by the window or anything, he needs to be able to leave the situation and feel safe and happy. And that's what's most important here. As we can see, we have progressed quite a bit here to the point where Newt is now able to go almost anywhere that I point this stick. He will travel from that perch all the way across to the other side of the cage without a second thought. He's very eagerly going as far as I want him to because he wants that stick, and every single activity he's done with it has had a positive relation. The more positivity and treats and fun times he has with these, the more he's going to want to do it, the more eager he's going to be to participate. And as we can see here, he's very, very eager to participate. And now that I've had a little bit more time working with him, I can see he's not really aggressive with his food, and I'm able to start feeding him with my fingers and all sorts of things like that, which I wasn't eager to do before, just because I don't 100% know this bird's background. But since I've been working with him, I've been able to watch his behavior, and we can see that I'm able to start feeding him straight from my fingers and control more of the portions that he's receiving. So Newt here did a very, very good job. This trick was done in about 2 or 3 sessions, I believe. He picked up on it very, very quickly, but how quickly a bird picks up on it will completely depend on how tame your bird is to begin with. Newt was hand raised. He was just then left in a cage and basically ignored for the entire year that he had been with the previous people. So Newt here just was not a fan of hands. He wasn't afraid of them or anything like that, so target training him was quite a bit easier than it may be one of your other birds there. So that'll about do it for this tutorial. I know Newt learned rather quickly, so it may have made it a little bit more difficult for you to pick up on some of the more intricate steps. Do remember that Newt here was a really, really quick learner, which is rather unusual for birds who have never trained before. So your bird may need to take much slower steps. They may need an extra little gap of time to get used to the object you're putting near them. Don't push them past their boundaries, give them plenty of space, give them plenty of time to learn, and it just takes things slow to start. Remember, this is probably the first thing they're ever learning. They're not going to pick up on training like that, so you may need to give them a lot more time and just move at their pace to make sure they understand what's happening. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more, please let me know if you've got any ideas. I'm constantly trying to read all the comments down below, so don't hesitate to leave one. Odds are I have probably read them. So thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you'll enjoy seeing Newt in far more videos in the future. I certainly look forward to making more with him, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!